maintenance is done appropriately, and that somebody at the park isn't taking funds that technically would be Atherton funds and converting those to their personal use. And do we have control measures in place to prevent something like that from happening, and are we tracking?
That's
Is that-
exactly what I'm asking.
And we are.
What's
And-
happened in history is history.
Right.
I just want to know where we are now.
So okay, then I'm gonna tell you what we're gonna do, then you
Good.
can tell me if that covers all the other areas, because, okay, so the things we can think of is cash collection procedures, obviously. Then, so we'll look at, how the event's booked, how they book it. But, maybe we need to have a conversation about how it actually works, because I'm not sure if there is also a expenditure side of it, or.
We do, and,
Okay.
and we track it through the revenue as a park, the expenditures through the park, so
Okay.
the accounting transactions are easy to identify.
Okay.
We have the booking process that it goes through several steps. Anything that is approved for an event, the city manager has to approve to make sure that they can have the event there. So there's a lot of checks and balances, and I understand your concern, but we do have procedures in place. We do account for it. It's accounted for in the park revenue and the park department as well. So,
Is it not
Do we have-
contracted out
do
to
we
a
have
private
procedures?
contractor?
and it is contracted out, and we do track that as well. We track we track the bookings, we track the revenue, we track what we pay the vendor based on the contract. They review the contract as well. So yeah, there's a lot of procedures that we do have in place.
And do we have similar procedures to control the growth in our liabilities? I mean, what happens now if the PERS board prevails and suddenly there's an increase in our post-retirement liability? Does the city council get to review that? Is there a record of that being tracked, or does it just kind of happen?
Well, no, we notify them.
I can answer that question probably better, Robert. The APOA's employment resolution negotiated salaries and benefits as well as the miscellaneous one includes what you're talking about from the CalPERS recent decision to add additional duties or responsibilities, special licenses, special add-ons to employees that count as pensionable income for their regular salary. The only way the town has to incur that liability is if we put that into that salary and benefit resolution as something that we will compensate the employee for. So if the council in approval of that resolution says, yeah, employees who have a special evidence permitting license and that work in the evidence room, they'll get an additional 3% pay, that counts towards their pension under the CalPERS rules. If the town never provides that, we don't have to incur it.
Okay. So it won't happen unless the city council knows what it is.
Correct.
Any other concerns?
Okay, so for fraud, we have a few questions. Do you have any knowledge of fraud or suspected fraud?
Current?
Correct.
Use the word current.
No. Anybody anybody
No.
answer anything other than no?
Okay. Are there areas that you believe that are susceptible to fraud?
Yes.
Sure.
Can you give some examples?
The 4 issues I just mentioned. So let's see what the outcome is of 4 questions I asked.
We'll follow up that.
Well, 5 areas really.
The 5.
Open accounts.
Open accounts, yeah, let's do it. Thank you.
Plus, taking the inventory to make sure it's all there. I want to keep coming back, we have to look at the balance sheet as well as the income statement.
And making sure that the transaction amounts are in compliance with the limits.
Yeah, we do that.
And I think that when you said the depreciated assets, when they subsequently were sold, I didn't hear you say what was done with that money.
What was some of the money?
Right, so if in fact a police car is sold, you didn't mention if that money makes it back into the general account.
It goes back into the equipment fund.
Okay.
You mentioned cross authorization or cross positions. or the person who has the budget and control also has the ability, or if that's your job function, but also has the ability to control that. Obviously, that's very important to check that, right? My question is, are you utilizing the internal computerization system that we have in regards to those particular cross positions or cross authorizations?
We just had a conversation an hour ago. We look at the access law. So we interview finance. Hey, can you do this and that? Then they're going to tell us one answer. Then we cross-reference it back to the access law from the system. So
Another question on my 4 items or 5 items, my credit cards.
I think she's not done.
Okay, sorry.
oh, no, did that answer your question?
What were the cross authorization positions to remember?
So did you mean, like, did we see any conflicts for this?
In which positions was the person who was approving also in charge of the job function that they were approving as well, and the budget? Was there any that you saw?
I don't think we saw,
So we do the internal control environment testing by reviewing the system assets and the actual duties, right? So far, we did not notice any conflict that will raise our concern.
so I want to just make sure we are, we are on the same page too. Sometimes there will be conflict, but then what we do is we look at mitigating control. If this person can do this and that, then are there another level of control that can catch those errors and mistakes? So with all those taken into consideration, we did not see any unmitigating conflict currently.
I have one other question on materiality, and what you consider to be material. Do you use percentages as a broad spectrum scope? For instance, if you say on the average $3 million is average in a particular category, do you say that within a 18 to 25% scope, if it's higher or lower, this is no longer material? Or do you look at averages based upon the total amount of budget in each category without looking internal into anything, purely as a total number?
So our materiality is based on reporting our opinion units. So we have, so here in the town, we have few reporting units. We have the entity-wide for the whole entity, then for each of the major funds and all the other funds added together. So then each of them has a materiality threshold. Then for each of them, we based on our experience, then we do a percentage of average of for a town like this. So the average of revenue and assets. Then we do a percentage, and then what we have something called a performance materiality, which is a portion of our materiality. So let's say our materiality for general fund, I'm just going to make up a number, is $1 million. Then if our performance materiality is 50% of that, so anything that is over that amount, then we have to, even if it is not material, we do have to pay more attention to it. Like if there's a fluctuation, if there's an adjustment for that amount, then we need to go, okay, well, what's going on? Why is it like that? Or sometimes during the audit, we may have immaterial adjustments, based on rounding or the difference between estimate and actual that comes in. We will add them all together and compare them to certain numbers in the financial statements to see in aggregate is there any effect. So there are many levels of, we have one materiality, but there are other things that we consider that build around the materiality.
Are we compared with what other towns or city governments we deal with?
We don't do across the board materiality because each city or town is different. You are on the smaller size, so if we just use if we treat you like we treat the city of Richmond, then most of the things here won't be material. Then we won't get into that kind of detail. So we treat this town as its own separate entity when we look at materiality.
What other governments are you auditing or have audited in the last 5 years
Personally, I have,
for your firm?
our firm,
Lots.
we have a lot of mostly cities and districts. I would say 95% of them are in the Bay Area.
Because normally, when you determine what is material, it's based on the percentage of the overall budget itself. And then you look at each one in comparison of what it could be or should be. So you don't even have to look internally into the transaction. You can look at the budget overall, and then you can determine if it's off or on. And then when you see the discrepancy, that's how you spend your time in determining your 25 things you want to look at. That's what I was asking.
Oh, sure. We unfortunately, we don't look at the budget, we have to, we have to look at the actual. So that's,
I mean,
so, and then, but we do keep in mind certain items, even if they don't meet the materiality threshold, we do look at them in more detail, like cash and investment is one of them. Payroll, revenue, all those we would pay special attention to, because we also have this thing called like political material, or if there's a fraud risk, and one line item may have a bigger fraud risk than another, so we do pay attention to those things too. We try not to dehumanize a organization to a set of numbers. Like we take into consideration there are other things that sometimes we cannot just catch by formula. So we do look at those things separately too.
Yeah, like the performance materiality, it's more like auditors' professional judgment. Each entity, a different city, we will, based on our past experience or the size of the city or the town, to decide what kind of percentage of the materiality that we will use as our performance materiality. So that one will take more into consideration of special entity that we are auditing.
Did I hear you correctly say that for Atherton, your performance materiality is 15%?
Oh no, that was just
That's just
making up numbers for my example.
Have you determined what the performance materiality is for this town?
Not yet. We usually look at we wait until the numbers come in, and we kind of judgmental decide.
To address my further thing, I forgot on the credit cards. I'd like to see, have any city employees use their personal credit card to make purchases on behalf of the city of Atherton and been reimbursed by the city of Atherton. Query one. Flip side, have any Atherton employees used their Atherton credit card for purchases for their personal use and then reimbursed the city? Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, some city does engage us for like a separate engagement. Some they will ask us to specifically look into that, pull lots of sample, because our engagement is as a whole entity.
Again, this was part of the policy that we put in on credit cards a couple of years ago, and I just want to make sure that this is a possible area of fraud, in both directions.
Now, the
Whether it
use of
requires a
a,
separate audit, it may be mundane, but it was just,
the use of a personal credit card for town purchases, that's not prohibited.
Yeah, and it'll follow the purchasing policy.
Right.
okay, then the follow-up on that, if somebody's using a personal credit card, are they on a rewards program where they're gaining points for their personal use at the expense of the city of Atherton?
I can tell you that in our town, that nobody's using their credit card just to purchase, to add points. Those that have a credit card.
Maybe
use
accurate
it.
now, that may have not been historically.
Right, but
Let's just put it that
I
way.
thought for the audit, we're specifically talking about for now, like right now in this audit.
Again, I
So-
just want to make sure these
Yeah.
policies are in place. I'm
Right.
not picking on anybody.
No. And they are, and I think if anybody was supposed to purchase something and they didn't have a city credit card, or they had to purchase something for the city, it, one, does follow purchasing policy. Two, if they're getting reimbursed, it's a valid reimbursement. We go through the same thing if we're paying a vendor for something.
Yeah,
So,
good question.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
so we do it that way.
Okay.
Number 3, are you aware of any allegation of fraud?
No, I don't believe so.
Are you aware of any related party transactions?
Current.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
No.
Yes?
No.
Oh, no, okay. So, those are our questions?
Yes.
Okay, so those are our questions. I think there are a few things that we need to get back to you. Oh, I'm sorry, we still have Gatsby update, right? How much time do we have?
We can just kind of go over just the 68, yeah.
Okay, we'll just do that one.
Okay.
Just do it real quick.
Yeah.
So, okay, this year we don't really have any significant Gatsby that needs to be implemented. Like, if there's not, there are 3, but there's no financial impact that you will see on the financial statement. In 2015 audit, so that will be next year, the most significant ones will be Gatsby 68 in conjunction with Gatsby 71, which is an amendment of 68. So, from a big picture point of view, what this Gatsby 68 does is that it requires the town to record the unfunded pension liability on the entity-wide statements. So currently, under the current standard, every year the town gets billed by PERS. So you need to give me this amount this year, PERS says. As long as the town pays that annual required contribution, there's no liability on the town's books. After 68 is implemented, then on the entity-wide statement, so there will be a statement of net position, the statement in the front, any unfunded pension liability will be recorded there. So that the unfunded pension liability will be how much you have in the PERS trust now minus your outstanding liability, basically. So that will be the big change. So a lot of people ask, well, how about the OPEB that we got implemented a couple of years ago? Currently, Gatsby is looking into applying the same treatment of pension, similar, 68, how 68 treats pension to the OPEB liability. So in a few years down the road, the unfunded OPEB liability will also be recorded on the entity-wide statements. On your fund level statements, there won't be any impact. So you're not required to fund it, you'll just see it on the entity-wide level, essentially. Okay?
Presently, it's just recorded as a footnote.
Correct. Any other
Does
questions?
anybody, I have one other question if nobody else does. As a finance committee, and maybe you can base this on your wealth of experience doing these with lots of public entities, what should we be doing along the lines of what we're paying you to do? Because you have so many escape clauses in your explanations that apparently it's still on our shoulders. Is it normal for a finance committee to do some internal auditing of their own?
It's funny, no one ever asked me that question. I think that's a great question. Okay, couple of things that I would recommend. One, learn how to read the financial statements. Governmental financial statement is a hybrid of regular financial statements. We have different levels. There's reconciliation. In the fund level, you don't even have debt or assets. So just to really learn how to read it, I think it would be very helpful for to provide guidance for the city staff. Also, if you have the resources, some internal audits will help because we look at the financial audit side. What we are saying is, okay, what the numbers reported on your financial statements is materially correct. We never tell you, not that we won't alert you, but we don't talk about the effectiveness of how you implement your policies, if there are ways that you can save your money and stuff like that. So, if you have the resources, I think you pick an area every year to do internal audit, that would be very helpful for your town.
Maybe you could fill that out a little further. I think it's an excellent question. And certainly, the audit committee is concerned with making sure that controls are in place, and you're looking at that and making recommendations back, and then the finance committee is assessing that. But what would an internal audit involvement be that might, either include the committee on recommending a policy or engaging in some kind of practice?
So, I'll give you some examples of what, we have clients that engage us to do these special projects, and some of them are, it may sound very silly to other entities, but there's definitely a concern why people do what they do. So for example, there's this one area that, one time my client was concerned about the amount of books that a city manager purchased. $400 per book, and 200 books were purchased in 1 year. These are academic books.
Books.
Yes.
It's a lot of books.
So there's a valid concern, and then, and then there was other issues, and then so we went in and we were counting books. It may sound like a waste of resources, but you understand, it's misuse of public funds. So for a regular audit, we would never even go into that level. So it is something that, like as internal audit you can do. There are sometimes we have clients that look into the supplies closets of your fire department to make sure that they are really accounted for, controls are in place, stuff like that. Those are not even capital assets, so it will never hit inventory list at our level. But it is something that.
Did you say that $5,000 was the threshold for depreciation,
Yes,
but not for inventory, right?
for depreciation, right? No. For inventory, if it's office supplies, you can't, we don't inventory paper clips, we don't pens or whatever, that's just, disposable equipment, office supplies that we use. But for capitalization, our policy is 5,000, it can be 5,000 up. It doesn't mean 1,000, $500, computers adding up together, okay, this whole office is $5,000 worth. It has to be that actual item. What we do count is like vehicles. When we purchase a vehicle, big PD vehicle, it's not just the vehicle, we have to outfit it. So what's added into the cost is everything that goes into it. So we have to and so that's, vehicles are well over 5,000. So that's what we capitalize. Anything in our threshold is 5,000 above is what we capitalize for depreciation that we have to, that we're required to. Anything below that isn't.
And other projects that I can think of that doesn't require a lot of effort is, and we do that once in a while, like we try to be unpredictable, so we don't do it every year. So sometimes, like for example, your purchasing policy has a threshold for a city manager. I forgot, is it 5,000 or 3?
It went up. It's
25.
It's up to 20. It depends on the category.
Goods, supplies, materials, non-professionals, 30K max.
Okay.
Professional services is 25K.
So sometimes, thank you. So sometimes what you can do is just run a PO list of $29,000 and above to see if somebody's breaking the purchase orders. So stuff like that doesn't take a lot of work, but it's definitely projects that you can do.
Projects involving an outside auditing firm.
Right.
No, I think she's
No.
applying internal.
So,
If I understand what she's saying, if we have a threshold of $30,000,
Yeah.
we could we could just ask for a list of all
Okay.
purchases that were $25,000 or above.
exactly.
Or between 25,000 and 30, or between 20 and 30, so
Right,
you just,
but your example of the $400 city
No,
manager
no,
books,
go
that
ahead.
was an outside.
Exactly. So, or you can, if you have time, you can
Yeah.
do it yourself too. So it's just there are many things that you can do that it doesn't really hit our level. We run those vendors lists once in a while, but not every year, because it really depends on what we're concerned that year, and then we kind of try to do things differently. So, but this, just a few ideas.
And just to kind of give you a level of comfort, because we have these policies in place, and because their testing is sample size testing random, we don't know what they're gonna test. We don't know when they come in, what is it that they're gonna pull. So we ensure that all those items follow the procedure protocol, because they could pull any of them and say, okay, this didn't have a purchase order. So there's the system of control just in the testing itself through an audit, is we verify, we make sure that that follows the policy. So when they come in at the end of the year, they could pull one that is 35 or more, and 35,000 more, or 30,000 more, and see that, did it go to the council approval like it was supposed to? They verify that that's attached to the invoice, that the PO has the proper signature. So all those things, we already practice only because we know that can be pulled at any time.
Anybody have any other questions?
So moved.
Second? Thanks, everybody. Our next meeting is September 11th, is that correct?
Technically, yes, it is. Every other month.
I have a few business cards, if I didn't give it to you in the beginning, please, if you need to talk to me, or Grace, please, we are